how real is the threat that we're going to lose whatever form of democracy we have right now? How worried should we be? My next guest has, I haven't talked to him in a while, always appreciate our conversations. He's written an extended piece about that you can find in nonsite.org and in Common Dreams, at least to name two, but originally published in nonsite.org, entitled The Whole Country is the Reichstag. Adolph Reed Jr. and I met on the Bernie Sanders campaign. And as I say, I always appreciate talking with him. He's an American professor emeritus of political science at the University of Pennsylvania. He's written a number of books and written and taught everywhere, I would say. And again, his new piece is The Whole Country is the Reichstag. So, first of all, Adolph Reed Jr., thanks for coming back on the program.
Oh, Richard, it's my pleasure, and it's good to see you. And actually, you look younger and better than you did last time I saw you. So I guess you
Uh,
must
maybe
be.
it's, maybe it's not working on a political campaign anymore.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah, but thank you. I don't get that particular compliment a lot. So I wanted to start off, Adolph, by saying that uh, there's this whole trend in the American political debate right now that, frankly, I tend to like bristle or whatever, react reflexively to when it comes from like mainstream liberals or political operatives or newspaper columnists or whatever, when they say, January 6th was a coup attempt and our democracy is in danger. I react with a kind of split personality. Part of me says, yeah, I've been worried about that for a long time, writing about it, thinking about it. Another part of me says, yeah, you're saying that because you want to broaden the reach even more of the FBI and the National Security Agency. And you want to use that as an excuse to, stifle left dissent. That's your real blah, 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 blah. I have all those reactions. When I hear it from Adolph Reed Jr., I think, yeah, okay. I listen to him. I trust him. So, with that in mind, I mean, I just thought your piece did a great job of navigating the straits, the shoals you could get washed up on in this debate. But first of all, do you understand the reaction I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the compliments about the piece, right? Because that means it's effective. But oh no, I absolutely understand what you're talking about, and I have the same reaction. It's like, yeah, but even to the point of the metaphor of navigating between Scylla and Charybdis, but sometimes, right? Um, I mean, liberals can make the right diagnosis for the wrong reasons, basically.
Right.
But but moreover, like with so much else, I don't think that they even believe it really because of what you said, right? Like
Right.
it's like the boy who cried wolf, right? And because because we've been around the track a few times, and every election since 1992 or maybe 96 or has been the most important election
Right.
in the universe. Like if we don't stop the Republicans, like the Republicans are going to end civilization as we know it.
Right.
We don't stop them, then nothing else matters. Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court, or Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court. But the end of the sentence is always so. Therefore, you have to shut up and not demand anything, right?
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and follow behind us as we march in increasingly behind the right on its pull of the center of gravity of national politics farther and farther right. But don't worry, like we aren't going to do anything for you now, but at some point we'll come back for you. Trust us.
Right.
Right? So this is what we've gotten from from them for so long, and that now, whether or not they believe it, or many of them, I mean, believe it, or believe that the extent of the peril is as great as they're claiming. doesn't really matter because I think it's objectively true. And I think, as I
Hmm.
tried in my piece, that it's true this time, partly because it's been cooking, right, with bipartisan chefs basically
Right.
40 years. I mean, this is the outcome, and it may well be that neoliberalism has gotten to a point where it's exhausted its capacities for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is 2008. But it's gotten to a point where it can't deliver enough to a large enough share of the population to maintain its legitimacy as a political and cultural and economic order. And what that means, or if that's the case, then that could very well mean there are only two paths forward. One is in the direction of something like, a social democratic policy orientation, and the other is in the direction of authoritarianism. And it just seems like we're at that T intersection now, right? And we've got to go one way or the other. And I get frustrated, and I'll shut up. I had too much coffee, but I get frustrated with my friends and comrades on the left who have the knee-jerk reaction. I mean, like you, I have that tendency
Yeah.
also, but it's not enough to say that just because the liberals are concerned about this problem, that it has, therefore it has to be bogus. Because, well, you look around the country, right? I mean, ways that at the state level, right? I mean, the Republican Party has been attempting to suppress voting, right? To stifle any kind of dissent, right? To prohibit local governments from acquiescing, right, to implement federal policy, right?
Right. Right. Much less to set policies of their own.
Right.
So the cities in Jackson, Mississippi may be enjoined from doing what any community should be able to do as a matter of law because I know exactly what you're talking about. And if I can step in for a second, you put your finger on, I think, one of the reasons why some of us on the left, the real left, we can define the left, but have the reaction we do, and why I think we need to overcome it. Because I think and obviously I'm saying this, but I want your thoughts. During the Trump years, I think they personalized the tendency in the personality of Trump, that they presented Trump as something unique and rare. I mean, I had this historian, Timothy Snyder, who's been talking a lot about this. It was all about Trump, 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 whereas Trump and his followers, to me, it was, in some cases, a shift in degree, and to say, not essence, right? And so to say that Trump presented a unique threat to political democracy. Well, first of all, A, we don't have a fully functional political democracy. B, Trump is a threat, but he's not a unique threat because Mitch McConnell and all the Republicans you want to legitimize now that we're rid of Trump are busy out there doing everything they can to subvert democracy to the extent we have it. And, this is what you want to go back to, you being the person that usually presents this case the wrong way from the wrong place. What you want to do is go back to the bipartisan neoliberal consensus that got us Trump and will get us worse than Trump in the years to come. You get what I'm saying, right?
Oh, yeah, I got nothing to add to that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely correct, and it's frustrating. Someplace lately, I don't know if it was in this piece or not, but like I referred to Trump as a cross between Lonesome Rhodes from the fifth film Face in the Crowd,
Absolutely, yeah.
right? And like Charlie Manson or something, right? I mean,
Right.
but it might be helpful, like for listeners to recall that when Trump emerged, most of the right was opposed to him, right? They tried to stop him, and then they figured out that he's like a useful shill, right, or a tool. But he is a pitch man after all. That's what he does. and I mean, I agree with you completely. Trump was never the problem, right? I mean, Trump, and we know how these people operate. Like if Trump were too much of a, if Trump got too far up, off the reservation, and among and that was never likely to happen because he's he's enough of a sociopath, right, to know where his bread is, right?
Right.
And it, yeah, but there was always a danger, of course, that he could go off the rails, on one day and have his go to damn room, right? But but if he had really gone off the rails, then they would have found a way to get rid of him, right? And
Sure.
and I'm not talking about the Manchurian candidate or anything like that, but there are a lot of ways, obviously. But when Earl Long was a lieutenant governor of Louisiana, his wife had him kidnapped by state troopers off the highway between Baton Rouge and New Orleans when he's coming back from a visit to a stripper mistress. So there's a lot of ways things can happen. But
Yeah, Melania Trump, I think, is probably capable of even worse. So there's that.
so
I mean, I wouldn't mess with her. This is a digression, but the rumor here in D.C. when Trump was president was that she had basically a price list for appearances with Trump. You know, a lunch was X, a dinner engagement was X plus. You know, that it was just like, boom. Here's your menu, man. Make a choice. So, but. Yeah, and we saw it was interesting to me in all of this, by the way. I mean, if you think of like I tend to sometimes think of the US political establishment as having two wings, domestic and foreign. And when you think about I was stunned by the fact that when Trump wanted to draw down or withdraw troops from Afghanistan, that Democrats and Republicans in Congress immediately passed in the Homicide Services Committee anyway, legislation saying before you can withdraw any troops, you have to get sign off from the generals that this will cause no national security problems, which of course you're never going to get. Who knows what will be caused by anything. And it basically vetoed the president's right to leave a war without the authorization of the military. You have Mark Milley going to China and so on. So, I mean, to me, these are some of the mechanisms they could always use if a Trump goes too far off the reservation. But, getting back to your other point, I think this goes to what, I know Chantal Mouffe and some other people call left populism, right? I think of what you're describing as an alternative force, like shorthand as left populism. And so, Thomas Frank's been on the show a lot. He talks about how they vilified the term populism and associated with the far right. That also seems to me to be part of this effort that you and I have to challenge, to have the conversation you talked about in your piece. We're not. We can acknowledge Biden is doing some good things within a limited framework. We can acknowledge the threat, a very real threat of loss of the democracy we have, without buying into, therefore, let's go back to having Mitt Romney and Barack Obama agree in a debate that we're going to have to cut Social Security, right? I mean, I'm ranting. I'm sorry, but your thought.
Well, no, man. Look, I'm 100% down with that rant because I think that's where we are. And I mean, the left-right populism thing has bothered me for a while, and one of the reasons that it's bothered me in particular is that some people, and this doesn't really count for anything, but there's some burrows, right, in the Kafkaesque sense out there, like on the internet, of people who understand themselves to be anti-identitarian leftists who at one point had gravitated toward my work a lot, and
Right.
who are now also sort of jumping off, from that point to imagine the possibility of what they call a red-brown alliance for left populism
Right.
and right populism. And like Thomas Frank, and in fact, like my friend Walter Ben Michaels and I had contemplated doing a piece the type of which was there's no such thing as right populism, right? I mean,
Right.
but yeah, but there isn't, right? And calling this reactionary populist or this reactionary politics populist, or even for that matter nationalist, is much more a way for the liberals or the bipartisan post
Right.
neoliberal ideologues to discredit the left, right? I mean, they did this against Bernie too, right? It's like Bernie on the one side, Trump on the other, and
Right.
that's only to the extent that each tendency, each current of motion expresses the extent to which the neoliberal consensus has made many working people's lives much more precarious, dangerous, frightening, but uncertain. But they're opposite reactions, right? Obviously, and they're not equal and opposite. I mean, reactions. They're fundamentally opposed to each other. And it's funny because some of these young leftists, I think, were calling themselves Strasserites.
Right. Which, of course, yeah, the sort of socialist-like
Right.
wing of the Nazi Party, right? For those who don't know, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, but my thought was, well, but didn't you watch this movie to the end? Like, you know how this is going.
Right. Right. And, and I guess this gets to the difficulty of conveying this message. I mean, I for some reason I'm thinking about the guy who called me like a democratic like cattle herder or something, that really all I'm about is herding people mindlessly into the neoliberal elite by pretending to be. It's like, I remember thinking, I can't say it on the air, but you mother effer, you're a registered Democrat. I'm not, I mean, it's like, but the point being that I guess if we get addicted to any stance, I mean, whether it's whatever it may be, identitarian, even anti-identitarian, that we can't do an accurate analysis. If we can't do an accurate analysis, we don't have hopes of prevailing in the end, right?
I think that's right. And I think another facet of that problem is that progressives, right, it's been so long since we've been able to think about winning anything, right?
Yeah.
That we've lost over time, and I mean our side broadly has lost the capacity for the kind of political imagination that would enable thinking strategically about politics, right? So what happens? Right. You can't win anything, so there's a tendency to retreat more and more to a politics that helps you feel good about yourself, right? And I mean, feel
right.
good as this person, right?
Right.
And that's what leads to this. I can't believe. So, like, I did a column in the Progressive in 2016. After Bernie folded, and I mean, after watching all of the Never Hillary stuff out there, and
right.
fan of Hillary Clinton, obviously. I mean, never have been, though I think in some ways actually she might have been less or Clinton presidency in 2008 might have been less costly for us than the Obama presidency.
Well, I still think about, I'm blanking on her name now, probably Melissa Harris Perry, or, whoever, writing in 2010 that any criticism of on economic or populist grounds of Obama was actually nested hidden racism, that in fact, even if it came from a black person, that it was that you just didn't, so there was that element of it with Obama, I think. And I think the cruelty of, I mean, maybe we're digressing a little bit, maybe not, but I think the cruelty of the Obama presidency to me historically is that he offered so much promise. The moment was filled with so much promise. The public was ready to break up the big banks. The public was ready to initiate broad social programs on a kind of New Deal scale. And he came in, and my feeling is he just wanted to be in the club. He just wanted to do what the club wanted. He wore Larry Summers, Tim Guy. I remember when the articles after I had an encounter with Tim Geithner, the articles that said they had a bromance, Obama and Geithner. It's like, that to me is a heartbreaking lost opportunity. And I think only now are Democrats willing to discuss some of them, the base, the shortcomings of the Obama presidency.
Oh yeah, I think that's right. Only now, right? And some, but and look, man, like I've often said that it's more important to be in the right place at the right time and pay attention than it is to be smart. And I just happened to be in the birthing room at the outset of Obama's political career, so I saw the act
right
from the first race forward. But notwithstanding that, kind of insider knowledge, like I kept saying to people in 2008, look, he's got more Wall Street money than anybody else in that race, right? And it's not because they're committed to civil rights. So there's something else that's going on here, right?
Right.
You remember the moment, right? Like there was no, right? I mean, this was, this was kind of the equivalent of a moral panic, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah.
And frankly, he never really promised anything, right? Because and there's a way in which, and I know this is a digression, I'm sorry, but there's a way in which he was like kind of the warm-up act or the yin to Trump's yang, right? Because they both offered the same thing. I am the solution to your problems. I embody the solution to your problems, and it's linked to my persona, and it's and in Obama's case, though he never said this himself, right, of course, but it's linked to the pigment of his epidermis, right?
Right. And no, that's exactly. I remember. My theory was maybe Obama would be a neoliberal for a year. Then he realized how bad things were and kind of flipped, like the way some people think FDR flipped. And although we could have a whole discussion about that, but that there was a possibility there. But I remember even before he took office, when he announced his key staffing appointments, and a report, I was watching with my wife, and a reporter said, well, these are all like retreads from the Clinton administration. Where is the change? And to your point, Obama's answer was, I'm the change. And I turned to my wife and I said, we're screwed. In that moment,
Yeah. Well, yeah, you called it, man. I mean, yeah, because that's what it was. And so I mean, you got to figure. Well, and I mean, I go back to this point too, like, according to Larry Sabato and his operation down at UVA, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the best of them. Somewhere between 6.5 and 9 million people who voted for Trump in 2016,
right,
voted for Bernie and Obama at least once. So you got to figure there's something more complex going on there than just horrible, backward racists and sexists and homophobes and xenophobes, but the entire liberal establishment. And this is why I cannot bear to watch a second of MSNBC right at this point.
Me neither. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were just in lockstep, right? And along with the liberal social scientists and all kind of race and gender reductionists, right? Academics and the like, just militantly focused on not giving like a molecules of airspace to the argument that there's something more complex that's there. And I remember I lost my point. It might come back to me at some point.
No, well, okay, let's fill out. It was complete what you said already, but while it's floating out there in the ether, another thought, which is to your point, it never gets mentioned, for example, that Trump got in 2020, something like 20% of the Latino vote, that he did better than Mitt Romney in 2016 among black voters, and that he did better than that in 2020. Now, they're small percentages for sure, but the fact is that particularly white progressives who almost, at the risk of getting myself in trouble, seem to fetishize people of color as a kind of projection or embodiment of what they imagine to be their own values that they don't even process. Even some professionals among them, political professionals, don't seem to process the fact that there's something, as you say, something going on here when 1 in 5 Latino voters votes for Donald Trump. Then it's not just a matter of, they all hate immigrants, right? So there's something else in it. Maybe a lot of them hate immigrants for sure, but and maybe there's deep-seated racism in this country. But if you, to our point about analysis earlier, if you all liberals can't internalize why you lost 1 in 5 of those voters, you're not, if we're trying to avert a bloodbath in 2022, ignoring that ain't the way to do it.
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest frustrations, like for me. I mean, it's like you can, I tell you what, it's like, a common dream, right? Where you're standing on a railroad track and see a train coming in, but you can't move your feet off the track. And that's what this feels like. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have seen, the little bubbles in the cauldron over the last 60 years plus. I mean, since Goldwater, frankly, right? And the different tendencies of really ugly, not just hard right? But like different nodes and facets of it, right? Like the Christian Zionism and all the rest of that stuff.
Right.
And Reagan brought that stuff in closer, from the fringes of the society, right? And George W. Bush, brought it in closer too, and Trump just opened the doors. And the key point, though, is that where there had been a Republican establishment that felt a need to hold that stuff somewhat at bay.
Right.
I think the big change since 2016, or really since Obama, has been that the dominant tendency in the Republican Party has become increasingly confident that they can pursue a strategy that will eliminate, democratic government, right, even as a formal concern, and that accelerated under Trump, and Trump in that sense was like a big orange condensation symbol that that all these tendencies that could come together under, and there they are, and they don't need Trump, and look at when Jeff Bezos gave Van Jones $100 million to go fight racism with, and he fell out crying. I thought, well, so what else do you need to know about this kind of politics, right?
Right.
But I think I asked this, in that article too. So do we really believe? While Bezos can certainly be committed to, at least a Gary Beckerite version of equality of opportunity, right?
Right.
Do we really believe that he gives a shit about democracy, right? Like in any way whatsoever? And of course he doesn't, right? His whole life, career, pattern of opportunity shows that he doesn't, right? And there are many others of them like that. So the question then is like, what happens, right, when their commitment to social justice comes up against their commitment to to maintaining a regime of upward redistribution with no challenge? Well, I think we know, because that's what gives us Senate, cinema, and
Right.
and and a mansion, and they're prepared to let the whole thing collapse, right?
Yeah, I'm. It's a homeopathic social justice, right? It's they want to give you a minute amount in the hopes that it'll inoculate you against future, social unrest. Um, and before I let you go, yeah, I know you're meeting a trade. So before I let you go, just a minute or so on Joe Biden,
Oh yeah.
because and the Biden administration, because you deal with that as well. Your point earlier about people sort of using their politics to make themselves feel good or whatever by what they oppose. Uh, the mirror image of that is they personalize politics in the form of individuals, right? So they can't look at a Joe Biden as being, we can use him to improve certain conditions. He's not going to be what we need. We need vastly, I'm sure you agree with me, a vastly transformative shift in our economy and our political vision. And we need a different way of living. But in the meantime, I always get into this, accelerationists as they're called. He's just going to like slow the pace of the revolution. It's like, maybe you're right, man, but I'm not confident enough in that to let 45,000 people die for lack of medical care next year. I'm just not going to take those lives on a guess. And so it's like, maybe we can close with your thoughts on, how can we envision, Biden is so far flawed in some ways, doing much better than Obama or Clinton in most ways I can think of, but of course not nearly what we need, not even close to what we need. But look, pulling out of Afghanistan, good. Starting new Cold War with China, bad. We can go down the list. 3.5 trillion, 1.9 billion in the end. They're trying to get for home health care. Good. So it's, in other words, how can we strategically think about a Biden? How can we accept what I think is a primary premise of your piece, which is, you fellow comrades on the left have got it backwards. We don't accelerate the change we need by things getting dramatically worse. We'll just be under their thumb. That lessening of tensions, we don't go into this, but creates hope, which creates activism, and so on. You get what I'm saying. But so what are your thoughts, I guess, to close on how we should think of Biden?
Yeah, well, like I'm 100%. I'm with you, and I'm old enough that I remember the accelerationist argument about George Wallace, right?
Sure.
And that didn't seem especially persuasive to me either. But a good friend of mine who was a longtime trade union president said once, like the only thing that I've ever noticed a little bit of fascism to beget is a lot of fascism, right?
Right.
That's not the way it goes. And I think that, and my friend Samir Santi is doing really great work on this. That Biden or the Biden as the administration, right, seems to have learned from the limits of Obamaism, and I think that at a minimum, what they've learned is that you've actually got to deliver something to people that they can feel and see, right? And you can't just do it with smoke and mirrors. And to that extent, especially given the nature of the peril that faces us now, in the space for the left is to try to encourage the best tendencies, like in the Biden administration. So, for instance, and as my friend Samir also pointed out, we have the luxury of not knowing, or should have the luxury of knowing that we have no ability to drive this politics at all. So the most that we can do is pay attention and look for the opportunities that we might have, like to intervene very much on the margins, which is all we've ever really had anyway. So that, for instance, even Brian Deese and the sort of Wall Street Keynesian tendency, right, in the Biden administration, that sees the need for infrastructural investment, still, I think, well, and I talked about it, right, in these terms, like they see themselves as breaking a logjam, or that will bring private capital, right, like into into infrastructure, and where we can maybe have some marginal impact is to keep the pressure on to demand in public, basically, or in those areas where we have some insider connections there too, to sort of press the position that the infrastructure investment needs to have as one of its goals expansion of the public sector, right, and public goods, which we need for a lot of reasons, and there are other areas like that as well. I mean, I'm really, I'm more proud of the Progressive Caucus than I've ever been, right?
Right.
To the way they're doing this now, but fundamentally, right, at a minimum, like I look at the Biden administration, the way that Molotov looked at Hitler in 1939, right? Like we need to get some breathing space, right? To arm ourselves against coming putsch. And I mean, I'll say this about about the January 6th thing, because I've had a lot of friends who just get indignant, that the liberals make too much out of that. But they missed the point, right? Because but the point wasn't that there were a bunch of crazies and it was ultimately like a kayfabe coup,
right?
But the point is that it establishes the principle, right, of overthrowing the government, and that's serious, right? But anyway, and
it only takes a small percentage of a population doing that to really destabilize a society. So there's a million things we could talk about, I know, but I also know you're meeting a train. So, all right. So I promised to get you out at a certain time. This is the time. So Adolph Reed Jr., again, the article is the whole country is the Reichstag. And really interesting. Someday I'll tell you about my experience teaching Ionesco to high school students, since you, it was amazing. Yeah.
I'd love to come back whenever you want.